Hey, folks, I'm Patrick Francie, host of my podcast, The Everyday Millionaire. And today I'm joined on the show by a young friend of mine who, in the context of seemingly ordinary people who have achieved extraordinary results, he qualifies in a very, very big way. Now, Balazs is a millionaire mentor. He's a visionary entrepreneur, and he's the founder of The Diamond Life, which is a global business movement empowering people to optimize their life and their business for more freedom. But not just financial freedom, but freedom of time to do what they love to do. Balazs has directly helped more than 2,000 people to achieve their goal of stepping out of the rat race and to leave their jobs and find both the financial and time freedom they've always wanted to live, which he refers to as their very own diamond life. The ripple effect of his global prosperity movement is responsible for over $500 million in sales by entrepreneurs around the globe, with his own team closing over 200,000 high-ticket product sales and earning over $350 million in commissions. Balazs is a committed mentor, a coach, and he is a family man to his wife and young daughter, and he hopes to create massive waves of prosperity across the globe by helping people from all walks of life build the life of their dreams. This is a fascinating conversation about health, about wealth, about business that's been created in a model of integrity-based sales. Listen in, enjoy. Now, before we get started, however, please like, comment, hit the bell for notifications, subscribe. We need those listeners. And please give me a comment. What you like, what you don't like is fine. We want to get those algos going to build this channel, to build this community of everyday millionaires. Thanks for listening in. Balazs, welcome to the Everyday Millionaire podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
I'm excited to be here. It's been a long time coming, Patrick.
Hey, hasn't it? You know, just to give the audience a little bit background before we kick off here, you know, I met you at least 10 years ago. It might have even been closer to a dozen years ago, when you were young and inspiring or inspired and working hard to, I guess, establish yourself and establish a business. And, you know, you were with a partner back then, but I mean, you were always really impressive. And now this many years later, I've been kind of following your journey, and you have been crushing it. Very, very impressive for a young man. And I say that only because I've recently become an old man, technically, you know, senior citizen. So anyways, Balazs, thanks again for joining me. So let's kick it off. Tell me, you know, and tell the audience, if somebody walks up and says, Balazs, what do you do? What's your answer to that question these days?
Yeah, awesome to be here, Patrick. I think it was back in 2004 or something. So roughly 10 years ago, definitely. And that was long before I became a millionaire. Also, it was just that phase of my life where I knew I would, I'd figure it out one way or another. And the search was on at that point, right? I was really looking for different business models, different ways that I could apply myself with my strengths, with my gifts. And it took me a while, like many people, right? It's trial and error. Start this, doesn't work out, you pivot, you don't really look at it as a failure. Like, I tried, it wasn't for me. I went over here, did something else. And in 2013, I actually came back to a business model that I had in my life for 5 years, but I didn't see it clearly and effectively. And what it was is high ticket direct sales. So essentially, that's what I do today. I also do many other things, coaching, mentorship, and some other personal brand businesses that I built in addition to that. But my core main business is high ticket direct sales on a global scale now in over 100 countries. We've helped thousands of people create freedom in their lives with our business model, and really looking to take it to the next level now at this stage 10 years later.
Yeah, and I've watched your journey along the way, and you know, watch your own evolution and your development. I remember back in those days where you were actually trying to figure out how to be a great speaker and what should I do, and we had a few conversations around that early on. Of course, you went on to do some great things. So when we talk about high ticket, give us some background of what those sales represent and kind of where you have gone with it.
Yeah. So, in the coaching and mentorship space, people consider anything over $1,000 starting to get into higher ticket price points. And then there's obviously a range of stuff with there. So we operate primarily in the $5,000 to $15,000 price range. And we're going, seated, business, sorry, um, person to person sales, not business sales, not enterprise sales, right?
Mhm.
So we're really working with everyday people that have all different backgrounds, all different ages, skill sets, experiences, all different walks of life, helping them transition from traditional jobs, traditional businesses that are very time consuming, and helping them transition into more of an automated online business that gives them more freedom, more flexibility, allows them to travel, spend time with their families. So we operate in the 15K price range, would be top line. And the nice thing about it is it pays out 50 to 70% commission. So when you look at like real estate sales, for example, we're right along the similar commissions without having to sell something that costs hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in many cases. Obviously, luxury real estate's a different story, but we have $6,000-7,000 commissions on a $15,000 sale. And so people very quickly can replace their full-time incomes, and the average person doesn't require that much money to come home, spend time with their families, etc. So it's been really a passion project for me, along with it being a big business, because I'm trying my best as my mission and purpose to just create freedom in families' lives so they can actually spend time together, unlike the majority of people out there that never really see each other very much.
Yeah, and you've certainly done that for yourself, and you've gone on to continue to kind of grow your brand and grow your business. But give us a little bit of detail into the product, and what got you started on the path of Enagic and Kangen, I guess it is, and they go together. So give us a little bit
Yeah.
more background on that.
Yeah, so I'll rewind a little bit just for all the audience who doesn't know my story. So my story began me immigrating from Hungary, Eastern Europe, when I was a little boy with my parents, and they were really in pursuit of a life of freedom, but in a different context. Back then, Hungary was a communist country. There wasn't any opportunities for people there, and so they wanted to escape that and go somewhere else. And it was basically Australia, America, and Canada that they were really set their eyes on. And it just happened to work out that we ended up in Canada. So from there, I grew up in an environment that my parents were super hardworking. My dad was in construction, drywall, things like that,
Yep.
and my mom was working as a cleaner. And so both of my parents worked really hard. We didn't see them at all, really. And so I created this like love hate relationship with money, because part of me as a kid who didn't understand what money was and why it's important and how you earn it and things like this, I just really hated it because it seemed to be the thing that stood between me, my parents, and quality time and things like that. So I just grew this hatred towards it. And then as I grew a little older into my early teens and high school and things like that, I started to shift that attitude towards falling in love with the idea of solving the game of money. So I had this hatred that I knew wasn't going to serve me. And I shifted it to like, wait a second, maybe I just got to learn what other people know that are wealthy, that are free, that have this beautiful lifestyle. And I'm like, there's something that they know that I don't know. And my parents didn't know it and nobody's taught it to me. So I went on this pursuit to try to crack the code and figure that out for myself. And that's how it all started. So there's two underlying stories. So there's the story of lack of time, lack of money, my family growing up in a divorced household. And then underlying with that, I also had health problems ever since I was about 5 years old. I suffered with stomach related digestion issues. And so my parents were always trying to figure out like what was wrong with me. And we changed our diet. I had supplements, cut things out, allergies, you name it, went to the doctor, the hospital, all these kinds of tests. And it was really annoying in some ways because I would feel like garbage, like really in pain, a lot of discomfort, kind of all the symptoms of like the Pepto-Bismol symptoms, right? The stomach
Mhm.
ache, that can't go to the bathroom, the heartburn, all the things. And so I was always in a mild discomfort. But when I went to the doctor and they did tests and stuff, they always said that I was healthy. It's like they came back, you're a perfectly healthy young man. And I'm like, but I feel like shit. Like, how am I supposed to actually believe that I'm healthy? So there was this huge disconnect. So this went on for a decade. And when I was about 16 years old, the doctors finally determined or diagnosed me with a condition called gall sludge. And gall sludge is similar to gallstones, except it's like hundreds of little tiny sandy particles in the gallbladder as opposed to a couple bigger stones.
Oh,
And they said that if you don't remove your gallbladder, every time one of these particles escapes through the bile duct. It gets stuck, and that's what was causing me this excruciating pain for up to a week. And then it would pass. I would feel like it never happened. It would be really strange, like what? Like the pain would just disappear, and then I'd be back to normal life for a few months, and then boom, again out for a week. And it was just really not a good way to live. My mom was watching this, going like, my son is suffering, man. I got to figure something out. And I'm so grateful for her, right? Her unconditional love, never gave up on me, never said, you know what, son, it is what it is for you. You just have the stomach issue. She just kept fighting, kept searching, kept learning. And that's how this water actually came into my life, was my mom's pursuit of finding an answer. My gallbladder got removed. My symptoms got worse. We had tried everything the doctors recommended. And then in 2008, my mom came across some books that she was doing some self-educating around holistic nutrition, alternative medicine, really trying to understand, like, is there another better way than the traditional medical system in North America, treating symptoms and prescribing medication and those kinds of things. She's like, there's got to be a different way. And she starts reading these books, and it just kind of hit her in the face of, they started talking about water. And at that moment, she realized that for 10 years, all this stuff that we had gone through with the doctors and the hospitals and all the things, they'd never asked us about our water. They never said, hey, how much water do you drink? What kind of water do you drink? It was never brought up. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of strange. And then as she's reading these books, they're talking about, well, 70% of your health, 70% of your body is made up of water. So the type of water and the quantity of water matters to your overall health and wellness, vitality, energy, ability to detoxify your cells. All these things are connected. And we're sitting there just beating our head against the wall for the 30% of our health, and it wasn't helping. So as we discovered this idea around water, my mom started doing some research and discovered this company from Japan. It was 35 years old back then. It's about to celebrate its 49th anniversary actually next week in Las Vegas. So it was a 35-year-old established Japanese company, premium brand, hand-built technology, and it had all the patents, it had all the certifications. Like, it was a really reputable, straight company. And it was really weird because we're like, how have we never heard about it? 35 years is a long time for someone to tell us about it, and nobody had. So we were broke as a joke, as I mentioned earlier. And so the idea of investing in a bit of a higher ticket product, which this is, was out of the question. And so we found someone on Google. He ended up letting us know, hey, you can try the water for free from his machine in his home. We didn't even know this man. He was a complete stranger. And my mom said, free? Well, that's all we can afford. So we'd love to try it for free, right? So that's how it all started. And she brought it home. I was a huge skeptic. I was really in a dark place in my life. At this point, I was starting to really lose hope. I maybe had 1% of hope left after 10 years of trial and error. Nothing was working. So I was a pretty cynical, negative guy at this stage in my life. I kind of told my mom, leave me alone. Water, yeah, right. Like, there's no way water is going to help me. And she's like, please just try it. I have a really good feeling about it. So I was like, fine, I don't want to upset my mother. So I drank it for 2 weeks, and all of a sudden my symptoms were gone. And I was still skeptical. I thought it was placebo. I didn't want to believe it at first. And it wasn't until a month after I drank it for a month straight, I went away for a weekend with some friends for 3 nights. And I never would have ever thought to travel with my special water. It's like, who cares? I'll go get bottled water somewhere at the airport or whatever. And all my symptoms came back that weekend.
Wow.
And that was the first big aha, like, wait a second, the water might actually be doing something. And then I tried it again, like 6 months down the track, didn't have it again for a few days. And that's how it all happened. So that's been 15 years ago now that I've found this product. And I'll stop there, but we can get into sort of what happened next after.
Well, I'd love to get into what's next, but I want to unpack a couple of things. There's so much in that whole conversation, not the least of which is, I just had a guest on out of the US, a guy by the name of Daniel Gomez, who talked about relationship to money. And, he's quite a world-renowned speaker, but he talks about people's relationships and relationship with money based on, belief systems and how we're raised, and that, that I guess they would use the analogy of the thermostat. We hit that certain thermostat, the temperature hits there and it clicks off. And the next thing you know, you're down and you're running that up and down movement, but you never really get past that temperature that you're comfortable with when it comes to money. All about the relationship of money, which now I want to unpack it just a little bit, Balazs, because, that point in your life, you're young, you have a realization that your relationship to money didn't really make sense for you. You saw the negative side of things, and then you shifted. Was there a fork in the road moment that kind of drew you to say, hold it, I got to snap the hell out of it, I need to get into this money game or figure this out? Or was it just kind of, it just grew on you and you had a realization? So was there a fork in the road, or was it just a realization that you had one day in the shower kind of thing?
Yeah, it was a sequence of events that took place over years when I was at that younger teenager level. And I realized, like, at first I thought it had something to do with like looks. Okay. So I was like, man, I think all wealthy people must be good looking or something like that. I'm like, I don't really know if I qualify. So I was kind of looking for the external for a while. And I thought it was celebrities and movie stars and athletes and all these kinds of things that really required that. But then I started seeing people that just kind of looked very normal, but they still looked well off,
Mm.
putting their golf clubs in the trunk of their car on a Tuesday, going golfing. I'm going like, how the heck are you going golfing, man? Isn't everyone at work? So all these things started to just kind of break my paradigm around life itself, and I started going, that's not adding up. That's not what makes sense to me. And so I started questioning things, and I've always had I guess this skill or this character trait of curiosity. And I
Mm.
think that's one of the keys to success. It's the keys to changing your life, is being curious and open-minded to, like, well, why is it like that? Why is that person's life this way? And so I started asking tons of questions like that. First, internally in my mind, I didn't really ask anyone directly. Um, and so that went on for a little bit. Then I was a wandering generality when it came to working, where I didn't feel worthy of applying for a job that I wanted. So I never actually put my resume in or tried to get any jobs. I always got these hand me down jobs. So basically, through the grapevine, someone would say, hey, so and so's looking for a guy to be a roofer. You want to be a roofer? And I'm kind of going, I don't got anything better to do. All right, cool. Next thing you know, I'm a freaking roofer, right? And I'm like, have no interest in roofing, and I'm doing this stupid job. And then that got old. I got fired, whatever, just didn't work out. And then someone else is like, hey, this baker is hiring this night shift baker. I'm like, next thing you know, I'm baking a graveyard. So all these things were kind of like, and then I had this moment. I'm like, my life is literally going to keep going this way, where people just kind of give me their hand me down BS jobs, and I'm just going to keep accepting them. I'm like, nah, this isn't making much sense. So a series of events around my teens to early 20s. I got fired from 12 jobs by the age of 25. And then what I realized at this point is that I was unemployable. I realized that my mind was never okay with being told what to do, not because I was disobedient necessarily, but I was always problem solving. I'm like, that's not very efficient. I think I could do that better, but people didn't like that. So I became a threat. I became someone who wasn't like just a worker bee in the company. And so they always found a way to get rid of me, right? And so there's all these series of events that sort of led to this moment of me realizing I should be my own boss in something, but I had no context of what does that mean? How do you even start a business? How do you even work for yourself? It was just this complete disconnect. And then so I didn't even mention this, but my father had passed away from cancer at the age of 21. I was 21 years old and he was 54. And it kind of flipped my world upside down, because around that age is when I thought I would start like being groomed by my father to become a man. So I was like starting to feel ready. I'm like, I don't feel like a kid anymore. I don't feel like a teenager anymore. And then right at like 21, I'm going, all right, man, I'm ready to figure out this man thing. How do I become a man? And I lose my dad. And so all of a sudden I'm like, well, who's going to help me with this now? So I felt super lost for a while. And then when I was 24, I had met my first mentor. I didn't even know what a mentor was at that moment. But he sort of took me under his wing, and his name was Darren. And Darren, what was really cool about him is he gave me these little micro assignments. And basically, his perspective was, if I give you a micro assignment, like go read this book, and when you're done, let me know. If I did it, I would be a student who's ready for, help, mentorship, coaching. But if I just ignored it and never came back, he's like, well, you're not someone I want to help change their life or something. And I just kept delivering these micro assignments. He said this, I did it, came back. And so he helped me actually with a lot of those things. But that was the transition for me, was questioning, being curious, opening up, these new pathways of, wait a second, is that possible for me? Is that a reality that I could work towards? And then exploring that and sort of going in those directions whenever opportunities came up.
You make a really good point that I just want to shine a light on, because as coaches, you're coach, I've coached, we do this a lot. You've been coached, as have I. I continue to hire coaches, by the way. The point
Mhm, same.
is, we often ask the question, are you coachable? And people just
Mhm,
really don't understand that, there's nothing more frustrating than trying to work with somebody who says they are wanting to achieve something, but they're literally not coachable. And I say to those people, I'm sure your intentions are great, but I can't want something more for you than you want it for yourself. So when you're
so true.
ready, then go ahead. In the meantime, we pass on it. So I only say that as kind of one of those moments that it's a coachable moment on a podcast to remind
Mhm,
people that you have to ask yourself, are you really coachable? Are you ready to take direction? Because you just gave a great illustration of what that means. And you parked your ego. You didn't have any ego around it. You didn't push back. You just said, okay, I'll go do that. And you, in fact, went and did that. So I love that kind of moment in time, the story to share. So when you look at where you got to in terms of the work that you're doing today with Enagic and the journey that you went on, you saw the health benefits. You saw how important water is. Of course, you're starting and you got into it, understanding the science behind it. And,
mhm,
why don't we talk a little bit about understanding water? So Stephanie and I have been on water for probably 20 years. We were into a different product. I don't remember what it was, but we've always understood water. And for
mhm.
20 years, we've drank water. We've understood, alkaline based and pH balanced water. And we really kind of have always embraced it. It's just part of our life. We don't really think about it much these days. But why don't you give
Mhm.
us a little bit of science around what you learned on your journey about the importance of water? That would be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So it all started with, first of all, me not knowing anything about the water, listening to my mom, drinking it, experiencing it, and noticing that it was doing something. So
Mhm.
then I was like, okay, well, something's happening here. It tastes better. It tastes different. I feel good. Energy levels through the roof. So there's all these like immediate benefits. But most importantly, for my personal testimonial, is that my stomach stuff went away.
Mhm.
And that was like night and day. Like my quality of life was that it was probably 60% out of 100 for 10 plus years, not even knowing anywhere near what 100% felt like. And then as I started to heal from this and get better from this and so on and so on, I started to increase that closer to 100%. I'm like, wow, this is so different, right? And I think a lot of people out there, they don't even realize what their real energy levels are, what their potential is. They're operating so far away from that that they're not even close to great or exceptional or outstanding. So that was the first part for me. Then I started understanding, okay, well, what is the water really doing? And what it started off with was looking at the three most common reasons why people are sick. So the three most common reasons why people are sick are acidosis, so they're overly acidic. They're dehydrated, chronically dehydrated, like way far past dehydrated. They're like permanently there.
Mhm.
Um, and the final one is inflammation. So we have all these fancy different ways of diseases, calling them XYZ, all these things that are like man-made labels. But when we go and strip that down to the root cause within our bodies and our cells, most of them are actually caused by those three problems. So when I understood that, and by no way am I a scientist or a doctor or anything like this, is very layman's terms explanation.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, that does make sense. We're eating acidic foods. Our environment is very high stress, pollution, lack of sleep. There's all these things from what we eat to what we drink. It's all kind of setting us up to fail in general society. And I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. Not to mention that typically bottled water, tap water, it doesn't taste very good. It's not appetizing. It tastes like metal. It makes you bloated. It's kind of nasty. So if you had to choose between nasty water and like a margarita, you're like, I have a margarita or a latte or a cappuccino or a cup of tea or a juice. It's almost like anything but water because water's so freaking nasty most of the time. So it's not something people want. Whereas this water tastes pristine. So when I first had my sip, I was like, it just felt light, smooth. The best way I could describe it is it tasted like how water is supposed to taste. And
Mhm.
that's the best way I can explain it. Where I'm like, I taste, I'm like, wait a second. that tastes delicious. Like I choose this over all the other stuff now.
Mhm.
But whatever I've been drinking that was water, I don't know what the stuff that was. That was like some contaminated weird stuff. It's how it felt, right? So it started there. And then I realized that the machine that you purchase that connects to your tap water, the three key benefits of this water is the counterbalance of the three main root causes of illness. So I'm like, okay, so the water is pH alkaline, but it's not alkaline how it would be in the grocery store when you buy a bottle of water at Whole Foods and it says pH 9.5 on the label. It's
Mhm.
not the same thing because one, you can change with chemicals. So you can add baking soda and other things to water and raise the pH. That's not what this machine does. This machine actually electrically alters the pH and it's alkalized water. And the alkalization process, the ionization process, creates molecular hydrogen, H2. Now, H2 goes in the body and it's a free radical scavenger. So there's a lot of positively charged molecules in the body that are actually from the environment, the food, the acidity, the things that we're consuming. So they're searching for something to get released from the system. So when you drink the water, negative and positive connects and you flush it out of your body. And because we're made mostly of water, this is one of the easiest things someone can change instead of saying, oh, go raw vegan or, this really extreme shifts in lifestyle and diet that most people can't stick to. This is just change your water and drink enough of it every day, 3-4 liters a day, and you'll see some magic start to happen. That also solves the chronic dehydration problem, the acidity problem, and the inflammation problem. So naturally, people really start to shift from sick, overweight, unhealthy, inflamed, red in the face, puffy, all the things, to shifting over to having better health. So that's how it started for me. And then, funny enough, when we got our machine, my mom got a machine. She is not necessarily a businesswoman or great at communication or any of those kinds of things. English is a second language for her. But she has a really, really big heart and she really cares about people and she really wants the best for others, including me, but her friends, her family, her colleagues. So she started asking these people, hey, I'm just curious. Have you ever heard about this Kangen water before? And mind you, this was 15 years ago. And every single person said no. And she's just like, this is so strange. Like, where has this been for 35 years? I don't understand. It was such a weird thing. So she says, would you be willing to give it a try for free? My son tried it for free. I tried it for free. My brother tried it for free. And we all had amazing results. Would you be willing to try it for free? And just let us know if it does something for you. And we were genuinely curious at this stage because we're like, maybe it's just us. Maybe we're some kind of special person. Like, because our skepticism was so high, we needed like so much evidence that this was real that we just kept trying to find more evidence. So then at this point in my life, I was in a really, like I mentioned, a dark place. I lost my father to cancer 8 months before we found the water. I was grieving. I was sleeping in, smoking dope, like no job, no direction. I was just in a really dark place, like this depression. And then the water came into our life and it was the first positive thing that I was actually excited about. I'm like, man, this water just makes me feel good. Like feeling good is the real currency. Like if I feel good, oh my gosh, I could take on the world, right? I started to kind of shift this negative energy into like opening up my ideas like, maybe I could go get a job. Maybe it's enough laying on the couch watching TV all day kind of thing. And right at that time, my mom says to me, she goes, hey, listen, you're basically a bum sleeping on the couch, not paying rent. The least you could do is fill up water for these people that are saying yes to trying it. I was like, I really don't want to talk to people, mom, that's kind of annoying, but fine, fair enough. I'll do this for you. So that's how it started. And she started sending these strangers to our home. They're coming with those massive, like 18-liter bottles that you have at the break room at your job or something like this. Or sometimes people have them in their kitchen. They're coming with these empty, right? And I'm like not in the mood to talk to people. So I'm looking at their bottle and I'm like, man, that's going to take at least 15, 20 minutes to fill up. What are we going to fricking talk about? Like I'm like so annoyed by this thought. So I came up with a strategy. I'm like, my strategy is ask you a question and then I shut up and listen for 20 minutes and then you can lead. That was my strategy. So then I started asking people, well, do you have any health problems? That's, I thought like that would be a pretty good question. And I was so shocked that everybody had something going on. But when I looked at them, they didn't look sick. They didn't look like something was going on. but they're like, yeah, I got back pain, I got this, I got a psoriasis, arthritis, all the things you can imagine. People are listing off their problems. And I just kind of went, uh-oh, like I opened a can of worms because I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you anything. So I just go, oh, wow, thanks for sharing. Well, let me know if the water helps. That was all I did. And then people would leave. And what was incredible was they came to our place 2 or 3 times a week. And we always make this joke these days that it looked like we were selling some kind of drugs because people would come with these jugs and it was all day. You know what I mean? These
Yeah.
massive jugs, loading them in the trunk of their car. And there's this like teenager in the house just giving away water. It was very weird. And eventually people started to come and say, you don't understand. You changed my life. This water changed my life. My this is gone. My this is improved. And I'm kind of just shocked. And then where everything sort of started to change was people asked us, hey, look, are you the only ones like in Canada that have one of these things? Like, can we get one? And we didn't know there was any type of referral program from the company or anything. So we sent people to the guy we got her from, and that's when we got, excuse me, that's when we got introduced to the business.
Well, and isn't that interesting though? But let's go back on a couple things. First and foremost, I'm curious in your experience back then, to the degree you remember, like when you're sick, when you're not feeling well, when your body's toxic for whatever reason it's toxic. We're all a little bitchy. It changes your mood. It
Mm,
changes your frame of reference
100%.
to the world because you're either
Hmm.
in constant pain or discomfort, or your body's just out of sync. When you
Hmm.
were starting to drink that water back then, and I do have a, I mean, part of this question is I know the answer because I'll share a little bit about my own experience over the years. But what did you start to notice the shift in mood, or was it because you saw that you could monetize it that all of a sudden you got a little happier? And I say that a little bit in jest.
No.
Give me a little bit of
Yeah,
the
no, that's a
background of
great
that.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. No, it had nothing to do with the monetization at all. It actually had to do with like my mental energy was almost focusing on the pain I was in. So it was this constant like reminder, like, oh, I don't feel good. I don't feel good. Like, what can I do? What can I eat? Everything that I did from food to eating to how I laid on the couch was all around trying to minimize this pain. So I would, find out these different ways of laying on the couch with like a pillow between my legs and like in this weird fetal position, then that it would ease the pain. So all of a sudden I didn't feel that. And I'm like, I have mental capacity to think about something else.
Mhm.
And so that's where it started. I'm like, well, like, wow, like the sky is nice outside. It's like I didn't even notice the beauty of life because I was so in this dark place and this pain. So as it went away, I started to just kind of shift to a neutral mood, not happy, not upset, not grumpy, just kind of neutral. Then it stayed there for a little bit. Then when I started to be of service to others, which was actually by accident because my mom sort of made me. But when I became of service to others, I dreaded when the doorbell rang and someone wanted water. I dreaded it probably for the first 2 weeks, maybe a month. I was like, oh, eye roll kind of thing. And then all of a sudden they started coming back with the stories. Hey, I feel better. And then all of a sudden it was like ding dong. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm excited. Like, what are they going to share with me today? What is the change? What is the update? How are they feeling better? And so then I started to get excited and happy, not because of any business. We didn't even know about any monetization at this point. It was just the stories, the testimonials, the thought of like, my stomach stuff improved. We purchased a machine. We're giving it away for free. And now these people are having these incredible results.
Mhm.
This is really cool because up until that point in my life, I never really did anything where I had this direct impact on another person. So I didn't even know what that was like. So I had this introduction of like, wait a second, I really love helping people, man. Like, I really love the stories. I love the direct face to face interaction. And at the time, I didn't know what it was going to lead to, but it opened up this whole new part of myself of like, I need more of this in my life. And that's how it transitioned.
The reason I, like I
Mm.
say, a little bit tongue in cheek and I joke about it, but, many, many years ago, and I'm going to say I was 30 ish. So that's a long time ago these days. But, the point of it is that I was really struggling back then in terms of I wasn't sleeping well. I was never really quite feeling well. I was very irritable often.
Mm,
And I had just met Stephanie back in those days, and we started talking about some things, and I neither of us were big believers in you know going through to a doctor, for example. And I didn't know why. She was very clear. She was far for. She really introduced me to a holistic world of health and looking after yourself. And I went to a naturopath. In that whole context, we did blood tests and we did all sorts of things. And within that, the naturopath, did things like we adjusted coffee, and I was drinking green tea, and I was doing all sorts of things. But that's when I first got introduced to the conversation of water. And we literally spent, I don't know, it was several $1,000s, I want to say, or at least a couple of thousand on some version of a water machine. I just don't, I want to say it was Athena. I don't remember what it was. Anyways, the point is that I started to see how it shifted. I was feeling better overall. I was sleeping better. And although I'd cleaned up a lot of things in my life, so I couldn't necessarily attribute it to the water, I just knew that I also craved that water. Something that you
mhm,
said that was interesting is the taste of good water is it sets a benchmark for how you expect water to
mm,
taste. It's why it's hard drinking water out of a tap, or to your point, uh, even drinking bottled water. And I'll throw Dasani under the bus. I'd rather go
mhm.
thirsty than drink a bottle
It's
of
so
Dasani
true,
water.
man.
So I call it Coke's barrel swill, and so that is throwing Dasani under the bus. But that's how I
It's
feel about
funny.
it. Anyways,
Yeah.
that's how passionate we are about our own health. Now I look at that. Now I look this many years later, and I'm like incredibly healthy. I don't even remember the last time I got a cold. It was years ago, and
Mm,
I know it was a stressful time. And we just are healthy all of the time. And I know that a lot to do with lifestyle, but overall, we also are drinking that water. And is actually having you as a guest on the show was interesting because number one, I followed you, so I watched you kind of go from zero to hero, and you're crushing it out there in terms of the difference you're making in thousands of people's lives. I think that's very, very cool. I have
mhm,
a long time ago I came up with a quote that success is simple, significantly impact many people's lives every day.
mhm.
And it turned out to be that acronym. And what a difference that you can make in that industry called how do you support people in being healthy. And of course there's the additional benefit of how do you support people in gaining and growing their financial futures and their financial health as well along the way, and all from water. And a lot of I think people understand the concept because it's certainly more mainstream in a conversation than it has been in the past, but you're really living it. I mean, you're seeing, as to your point earlier, I mean, you're literally operating at a global scale, and you're working in even in countries where you're bringing water that is seeing the difference. Now, I don't want to talk at a school, or can you give us a little bit of background, even how impactful it is in other parts of the world?
Yeah, it's so big. So I think part of what I want to really touch on with this conversation around the water is we've reiterated so many things over the years of how we deliver the message, how we deliver the product, how we deliver the opportunity, because I am a huge believer in sequence. Sequence really truly matters. And when we look at, the ingredients in a recipe, for example, if you try to cook a stew or a soup or bake a cake or bake some bread and you do it the opposite way of the instructions on the recipe, it will not look like bread. It will not taste like bread. So you have to follow the recipe. You have to follow the sequence. But with business and health and wellness, it's not so clear. Like, this is the recipe. It's a little bit more like, here's all the ingredients, figure it out for yourself. And everybody keeps trying to make the recipe work. So that's basically where I feel like one of my strengths has come over the last decade building this. Is I first started off face to face with people after that experience with my mom. And there's an important little segment there that I want to just mention also,
Mm-hmm.
was because of my upbringing with the money piece and the limiting beliefs and the lack and scarcity that I grew up with. This machine is around $4,000 or $5,000, and it's a one-time purchase. So there's an important factor there with price versus cost, right?
Yeah.
Price is what you pay once, and then the cost is what you pay for the lifetime of how long that product or service lasts you. So in this case, you pay the price up front, but the cost is like pennies over the course of 15, 20 years. I still have the original machine from 15 years ago, and it's operating the same way. And so it's saved me so much money over that time frame of not buying bottled water and all the other products it replaces. So the point was that when I was thinking about selling a product for $4,000 or $5,000, like that was 4,000 times my net worth at that time. So I didn't feel worthy, right? I was like, who am I to sell something that is more money than I've ever seen in my life at one particular point in time at that point? So I had a really hard time wrapping my head around trying to sell it as a business or market it or whatever. And I was sabotaging myself. Excuse me. I was sabotaging myself because of those limiting beliefs around money. And so after we discovered the business model, about 6 months after we got the machine and the guy who we bought it from showed us the numbers and how it works, I had this deep burning intuition, like, this is it. I'm going to do something big with this thing, but I had no success with it. I tried to talk to people about it. Everyone made fun of me. Everyone said my mom is crazy and she got scammed. And I heard all the most negative stuff from everybody, but I knew that I believed in it because it changed my life personally. So no matter what everybody said, it wasn't impacting my belief in it, but I sort of got discouraged trying to talk about it. And then afterwards, me and my mom weren't really seeing eye to eye. It was that period of time where sometimes your parents feel like the enemy and you're just not really connecting and stuff. So me and my mom weren't really getting along, and I see it clearly now. She was right, and I was a fool at that age. So I'm sorry, Mom. I messed up, and she knows that. I've apologized many times. But I ended up moving out with $600 to my name, and 12 jobs that fired me was basically my non-existent resume. So I was kind of screwed. I had $600 to my name, had no skills, no formal education, no nothing that I could really rely on except for these random odd jobs that I had given to me, like pass me down jobs my whole life. And then I'm trying to look for work and no one would hire me because I have no references. So it was like this egg and chicken situation. I'm like, come on, man, give me a chance. And I stumbled into door-to-door sales. And door-to-door sales, I was selling telecom for one of the biggest companies in Canada called TELUS. And I was selling their TV and internet service. Mm-hmm. So mind you, I started to learn a skill set of communication, going to people's homes, giving them a deal. And I had to be like overcoming my own self every day because it was me versus me. It was like every day, the elements, it was raining, it was hot, it was cold, all the different things. And then it was like an opportunity door after door after door to improve my pitch, to get my message across, to give them a deal, all these things. So after doing this for 4 years, what happened that I didn't realize was that my money beliefs, my worthiness was shifting because I started to make more income in door to door. And I got it up to about 20 to 25,000 a month in commissions. And I thought I was rich, right? I'm like, I made it, man. I think I was 25 years old, no home, no kids, no responsibilities, no nothing except for $600 of rent, a cell phone, and I think like going out to get lunch. Like I had nothing, right? And I'm pulling in 20, 25K. I'm like, I'm freaking rich, man. I made it. But I had no freedom. And that was when I realized I didn't have freedom. And so the whole thing shifted from not having money my whole life to making money. Like I got to make money. I got to make money. I got to solve the game of money, to all of a sudden stacking cash pretty quickly in the bank from this job and having nothing really to do with it at that point. And I remember wanting to take my girlfriend on a trip to Mexico. We hadn't really traveled anywhere together aside from like a Whistler for the weekend locally, stuff like this. And I'm like, man, like I feel like I really earned this opportunity to take my girl and kind of show her this nice week in Mexico and live it up. And we got this all-inclusive thing. It was like, I think $3,500. It wasn't even a lot of money necessarily for two people, but it was a big deal for me at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I took her there, and I remember trying to ask my boss at this door-to-door company if he would like give me the week off, right? And I remember him looking at me kind of like with disgust, like, who do you think you are asking for time off? That was his attitude. And I'm like, wait a second. And it just hit me like I felt like a slave. I felt like I had these handcuffs to this job, even though the money was pretty good. And that in the moment I made that decision, I'm like, put a little smile on my face. I'm like, oh, okay, my bad. Like, when can I go? Like, just totally bow down in the moment. And in the back of my thought, I'm like, man, never again. That made me feel so small, so insignificant, of like, just being the master of my destiny and being in control of my life. I'm like, never again. I got so angry. So anyways, so behind the scenes, after my door-to-door day ended, I was looking for these different business models and back to the water. So this is the funny story that I always share is the water machine talks to you. And when you turn it on, it says, Kangen water 9.5, and it kind of says that to you. So every morning I'd wake up and I was kind of dreading going to the office to do my door-to-door thing. And I turn on the machine and I always hydrate about a liter of water in the morning first thing. So I'm standing beside the machine, keep slamming glasses of water, and it keeps talking to me. And I'm looking out the window. Man, if only there was a businessman that could, and it keeps saying Kangen water 9. And completely ignoring it. And then one day it all comes full circle. And I had a conversation with my brother. And he's like, dude, mom's been trying to build this business, man, for like 5 years. She's not really getting very far with it on her own. It changed your life. You believe in it. You now are good at sales. You're doing this door-to-door thing. You're making some good money, man. Why don't you work with mom? Why don't you set her up? Why don't you retire her? What's your deal, man? What's wrong with you? And he just calls me out. And everything he said, it was true. Everything he said was on point. Like he nailed everything, but it was hard to accept it, right? I'm like, you're my little brother, man. Watch your mouth, kind of like that was my initial ego response. But then when I went to bed, I was like, man, he's right, man. Like everything he's saying is true. So that was my decision to go back to the water. But the real distinction was the worthiness piece, because I had built that belief up. And I'm like, well, I'm a big baller now, right? I'm doing 25 grand a month. I can sell this machine for 4 grand. I believed in myself to go do that. And that was how things started. But I was still trying to sell the product. So it was very much water, health, like we're talking about so far on this podcast today. And what I realized was I was dealing with young people that were my age in their mid 20s. And I was doing these presentations talking about older people that have health issues, that are baby boomers, this kind of stuff, right? Because that was the company culture at that time. And all these people, I was losing them. Every single person, they're all like, man, I don't got no health problems. Like, I'm good. I'm energized. I'm an athlete. And so I realized that angle of my story and my experience wasn't actually going to ever serve that younger audience. And that's how we started to innovate and have these different iterations that led us to today.
Well, that's such a great point too, because the reality of it is that when you are young, generally, most people are pretty healthy. It's not a point in your life where you're not feeling good. So I'm assuming along at that point, Balazs, you started looking at Kangen as a business opportunity for others. Now,
Mm-hmm.
is the term, I don't even know, so this is a legit question from my point, is it
Mm-hmm.
still referred to as multi-level marketing, or what is it called these days? Because I don't know, because it is a bit of, that's what it was. I don't know what it
Mm-hmm.
is anymore. I really don't. But give us a little bit of background on what the business model is that you then stepped into.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there's elements of, network marketing, multi-level marketing, direct sales. There's a little bit of elements
Yeah.
of all of it in this business model, but
Mhm.
it really depends on how someone chooses to go about the business, where someone who, for example, resonates with like an online attraction marketing or running paid traffic on social media, like ads that lead to a web page or a webinar or like an online presentation that leads to like this automated process,
Mhm.
that person is going to resonate more with a high ticket affiliate marketing angle. And it can be done that way.
Mhm.
Now, someone else might go, you know what? Techie stuff isn't for me. I don't like the ads. I don't like paying money for that kind of thing. I actually love the face-to-face model, and I love the friends and family, or going and networking and meeting people at meetup.com or whatever, right? There's
Mhm.
other ways of doing it more traditionally, face-to-face, coffee shops, phone calls, and it works that way as well.
Mhm.
And that person's going to refer to it as direct sales,
Mhm.
right? Then you're going to have someone who might be more of a traditional person who's like, okay, well, I just want to build a downline and I want to recruit people for that intention, which is going to be more of a multi-level marketing approach, but they're all of them, depending on how you build it. The model itself, what I loved about it personally is that it was more like a franchise model, in the sense that you sell one of these machines and it becomes a profit center in your organization, and you make the commission on that transaction upfront. And if
Mhm.
that person never sells a machine, is no interest in selling the machine, they just wanted the water and the health benefits, you still make a pretty good commission.
Mhm.
And that could be the end of it as a single transaction.
Mhm.
But in many cases, what happens is someone will purchase the water, drink it for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, years, even, right? Like in my case, it was 5 years before I really built the business.
Yep.
And they own this distributor ID number that came with their machine for life. So at
Mhm.
any point, if they refer someone one day,
Mhm.
they will be compensated for the referral. And I find that really powerful because you're building these locations in this global franchise, but it's sitting on someone's counter in their home as a health product that they use for everything: cooking, cleaning. I mean, think about what you use water for in your day-to-day life. It revolves around almost everything you do is connected to water in one way or another, right? Which is really powerful. So I saw the vision of, okay, if I can build this with a direct sales model approach, but then someone who puts their hand up and says, hey man, I want to take this thing seriously. Like, I really want to market this thing. I want to run ads to this thing. I want to build a network or build an organization. I was willing to work with those people. And so it's a bit of all of it. What I resonate with these days is high ticket direct sales, where I prefer to do things online. I don't actually hit up people that I know or message people or DM people, hey, you want to have a look at this thing? That's not my style. I like people coming to me. And I primarily do that through social media marketing, content, lifestyle stuff, where people just ask me, like, how do you live this life, man? It looks like you got a lot of freedom. You spend lots of time with your family. How do you build it? And then I introduce them to the concept around the model itself. And then when they find out what the product is a little bit later in the process, it's logically, it makes sense. They're just like, cool, all these waters are not good for me. This makes sense. It's an asset that I'm buying. And that's kind of how we've been doing it in the last little while, last 5, 6 years. And it's by far the best sort of sequence that we have found that works really effectively.
Well, it's one of the reasons that I reached out to you to get you on the podcast, because I saw what you had achieved, because I've known you and have kind of followed your journey. It was so fascinating to see somebody who had kind of taken it to that level and understanding just what your goal was, what your passion was, and was really in alignment with what you talked about even many years ago. Now I know you've expanded on that and
Mhm.
matured and evolved and developed and got married and have a child and all the rest of it. But
Mhm.
you really set the trajectory back then, and the path that you took to get there is also really interesting. But when you look at this particular model, I mean, it really does serve, and it works for many, and that's why I'm kind of looking at it going, as a business model, it's very interesting to see
Mhm.
what you've created and the opportunities, and then as you said, there's different ways to approach it. So I thought that was kind of cool. When you think about the aspect of what you've had to go through, we've talked a lot about mindset, just even before we got on, we touched base about mindset and the shift that you've gone through. Did it always, or was it kind of really intentional for you, Balazs? Because some people look at mindset and they go, "Oh, yeah, it's just the way it is. I am the way I am." And of course, you and I don't take on that. But when you're talking and thinking about your own journey, how much time did you actually take in terms of the study of understanding yourself, the study of mindset? Did you literally take it on and read and get coached? And how did you handle that part of it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So initially, I was completely unconsciously incompetent with anything to do with mindset work, anything to do with the thought of reading and self-help and self-improvement, and any of that stuff was foreign to me, completely off my radar. My parents didn't really talk about it. I didn't know it existed.
Hmm.
When I stumbled into, I'll tell you the story of how the whole mentorship with my first mentor happened. And on my new podcast that I started a few months ago, episode 2 actually gets into that story as well, if anybody wants to go into the super deep version, but I'll summarize it here. So here I am in this dark place. I started giving water away to people my mom was sending to the house. It shifted my mood. I started feeling better. I had this open mind all of a sudden to like I was almost disgusted with myself when I had a moment of like, what am I doing, man? I'm just a bum on my mom's couch. Like, it kind of hit me, right? I'm like, what the hell is my life turning into? But for a while there, I was just sort of ignoring it. I wasn't thinking about it. And then I'm like, ew, man, like get your life together. So I had that moment. And then I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Like, okay, so I'm trying to use my critical thinking of like, well, what's the first step to like get my life together? And I'm like, I need a job. You
Mhm.
know, I'm not sure why, but I'm like, a responsible person has a job. I don't even have one of those. Let me get one. So I go on Craigslist and I look at some jobs that I could get. And I had a background in customer service. I was a server that I got fired from these server jobs. So it was like customer facing type of roles. So I went on Craigslist in the job posting section, and I looked there, and it literally says bartender, waiter, all these different things. And then there was this company that was starting that was called, it was a promotions company. And I clicked on that. I'm like, that looks interesting. It was like, it said something, the title said something about new company looking to fill many positions, something along those lines. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So I click on it and I'm scrolling down this list, and it's like server, bartender, model, DJ, whatever things that you would think about like a nightclub promotions company, right? All these things, photographer, videographer, all these things. And at the very bottom, it says VP, vice president of this company, right? And something just inside of me was like, oh, VP? Like I could probably get my life together if I was a VP, but I had like no business at all thinking about being a VP. But something about who I am, my purpose in this life, my destiny, a higher calling, whatever you want to call it, gave me the nudge. Balazs, you can be a VP, man. You could be a VP. Why don't you just apply for the VP job? So, anywho, my crazy old self applies for this VP job. The lady who's the owner of this new company is on the phone. She's kind of interviewing me, asking me a few questions. And then she says to me, she goes, you know what? It sounds like you're a perfect fit to be the VP. You got the job. And I'm kind of going, this isn't adding up somehow, right? Like, I'm excited I got this job, but it's not adding up. So I'm just rolling with it. I'm like, all right. And then I tell my mom, I'm like, hey mom, I got this VP job. She goes, you got a what? So I'm like, don't worry, I'll tell you the details later. So I'm getting excited, right? And I haven't felt excited at this point in a long time. So I'm just excited. It feels good to be like looking forward to something. So I keep going with it. And then she calls me. She's like, your first task as VP is to hire everyone else that you saw on that list in the advert. And I'm going, how the heck am I going to hire all these people? I don't know how to hire people. I don't even know where to find these people. But I'm like, that's what a VP does. So let me start hiring. So next thing you know, I hired this little team. I got some models who are willing to do the promo. I found a photographer, and I did this in like 2 weeks. And so next thing you know, I hired this team, but we don't have money. The company owner has no money to pay anybody. So we're telling everybody, hey, listen, you got to kind of work pro bono for 30 days. We're going to get a couple gigs. And then as soon as a nightclub pays us, we'll pay you. And it starts getting weird, right? It's like you work for free. We'll pay you later. It's this bootstrapped startup company. And then next thing you know, we have this lunch meeting with this guy who wants to put on a big event and wants to hire us. So the owner says, you got to come with me to this meeting at Cactus Club downtown Vancouver. So that's how I met my mentor, because the guy who wanted to hire us was this guy named Darren. So we're sitting there and we keep making eye contact, and he keeps kind of giving me these little life lessons and these mindset little perspective shifts, and he's saying it right at me. And every time he said it, it just resonated. I'm like, man, that's a cool way to look at it. Like, never looked at it like that. So this guy's teaching me in real time with these little quotes and these little phrases and stuff. And at the very end, he goes, hey man, call me tomorrow. I want to talk to you about something. I'm like, okay. So I call him the next day. He goes, that woman's going to take you for everything you got. First thing he says to me. And I'm like, wait, what? And he's like, dude, I could see it from a mile away. She's a scammer. She's using you. She's playing into your ego. Gave you this VP job that you have no business being VP. Next thing you know, she's going to ask you to take out a loan, like a line of credit from your bank, to pay the staff that you hired. It's out of your pocket. And he just breaks it down for me in like 15 minutes. And I'm going, just shocked, right? And something about what he said, I'm like, the guy's telling me the truth, man. I just felt that he was right, because there was all these red flags, right? So that's how it all started with the personal development. Just to give you the backstory, because up until then, I had zero business reading books, trying to learn, trying to improve, nothing. Then after I trusted him and what he was telling me, the woman did ask me to take out a loan. And he was right. He called it like a couple days before it happened. And then I was like, whoa, I could only get approved for $5,000. And she's like, okay, you're going to get this loan, 5,000, and pay everybody for their first month of work, 5,000. So I was literally going to be out to nothing, right? And I declined. I said no. And that's when he started giving me these micro assignments. And one of the things he told me was to watch the movie The Secret. So I watched the movie The Secret, and it was the first time in my life that I felt like I was remembering information instead of learning it. And it was very weird. I had to pause the DVD, and I'm like, wait a second, did I watch this? When did I watch this? And I'm like, I've never watched it. What? Click play, keep watching it. And all the things on law of attraction, what you think about is like your reality, and all this little like lessons in the in the documentary. Like, man, I know this stuff. This makes sense. Why am I not doing it? I keep focusing on the problems in my life. No wonder it's nothing but problems. So all these things start opening up for me. I call Darren back and I go, hey, listen, man, what else you got for me? You got a book for me or something? Like, what else could I do? He's like, yeah, read this book, read that book, right? So I'm just kind of going through this process. And then I started reading a couple sales books and, or no, sorry, I got a sales job at the door-to-door thing. And I started to learn how to analyze my own, what I did well and what I could improve on for next time. And it was like self-taught. Like it just made sense to me. I'm like, okay, I had this pitch. This didn't work. Let me try this other thing. And then, but at the same time, your intro is really solid, Balazs. And I was giving myself some praise and like, you're doing awesome, man. Keep it up. But at the same time, you got to get better over here. So I'm doing this internally.
Mhm.
And then I got told about Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy and some of these like OGs, Jim
Yeah.
Rohn, some of these guys. And I'm like reading these books like Secrets of Closing the Sale from Zig Ziglar. And I'm reading it, realizing that I had figured that stuff out on my own through trial and error, but I didn't understand how to teach it. Like I couldn't explain it to anybody. But as I'm reading it, I'm like, that's what I've been doing. I'm like, this is so cool. And then from there, I'm like, what if I read books like a couple steps ahead of where I am so I can improve? And that's what opened up the personal development. Then from there, I started reading some books. I'm like, you know what? What if I could meet people at like a conference or like an in-person event where I could have immersion? I'm like, if I could be around people who know this stuff and be with them for 2 or 3 days, I'm willing to put myself in those rooms. And that just made sense to me. So then I started investing all my money, literally every penny that I had outside of my essential bills was conferences, events, flying to different places. And I was like on this hunt to extract wisdom. And I would get 1 or 2 little golden nuggets or whatever you want to call it from everywhere I went. That just leveled me up, leveled up my income, leveled it up. And I still do it to this day. Like I just came back from a 2-day event that I paid 10 grand for and literally learned a whole bunch of cool stuff. And also met a couple people that want to join me in my business. And that's going to make, multiple 6 figures, if not more, from that partnership. So I'm like, to this day, I know it's one of the fastest hacks to leveling up is proximity, paying to invest in yourself, and being around people that are further along the journey than you that can just kind of teach you the real stuff instead of you kind of figuring it out trial and error. So that's how it all happened. And now I actually am the person that teaches that to the younger generation in my business. I'm like, dude, you got to keep reinvesting. You got to go to these events. You got to show up. And a lot of them are doing it, which is really cool to see.
Well, what's interesting about all of this is, and I'll get to it, but I mean, this really is an integrity-based sale, which is also the bonus of it, right? An
Mm-hmm.
integrity-based sale, like you can really feel good and passionate about the product because it's got a track record, it's got a history, it's a
Mm-hmm.
business that's coming up 50 years old. You know yourself, you've made a difference in thousands of people's lives, and then on top of it, it's a cool business model that works for those individuals who would be willing to take it on in one way or the other. So I think that's an interesting part of it. When we get into selling, which I do, you're
Mm-hmm.
looking at selling, it's way, way easier when it's just an integrity based sale, when you can run into that person, in 6 months, a year, or in 10 years and look them in the eye and go, how's life? How is that
Mm-hmm.
product?
It's
And
the best feeling.
that's kind of cool. Right. So when you look at, what you've achieved, you've done so much, Balazs, and you're kind of wired in a very, very interesting way in terms of how you see the world and how you've trained yourself, and then the additional training that you've taken on and all of it. When somebody as young as you and you look into the future, I mean, you kind of crushed it. It's not like you got to get up tomorrow and go to work for financial reasons. You
Mhm.
may get up in the morning because psychologically you need to keep your brain fired up. Like, how
Mhm.
do you? Where's your vision for what's next for you in 5 years from now, 3, 5, 10 years from now? Do you ever see uh, not doing this, or would you have a vision of $1 billion? Like, where does your head go around this stuff, Balash?
My personal goal, my personal vision was around being a present father when I eventually started a family. That was my driving North Star for my business since I got started. And it took me 3 years to get to that level. And then my wife and I were progressing our relationship. We ended up getting married, and we had a little bit of a slower time getting pregnant. It wasn't easy for us. Like for some people, it actually was quite challenging before we were finally able to have a child. And that was my driving force personally.
Hmm.
And then on an outer goal, it was around paying that forward to other people. Like my favorite thing in my business is seeing families traveling together, homeschooling their children, spending as much time together as they want to, not having to do anything, but getting to choose what they want to do. Lights me up. So my social media these days, when I log on, it's all people in my business for the most part that are just sharing their travels, their adventures, and they're happy and they're together. And so that level of impact is what I feel like I'm still just getting started, because we have 225,000 sales in 100 countries in my business, thousands of people that are free now as a result of this business model and the training and the systems that we put in place for them to leverage. But I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface. So, from a level of like dreaming, my purpose in this life outside of my personal life and my family is a global prosperity movement. I genuinely believe that in 2023 and beyond, with the power of the internet and technology, now AI and everything that's happening in the AI space, we don't have to follow those models of 9 to 5 jobs and working those long hours and being apart from our families and the old traditional roles. So like I'm completely against that. I fight against that model. I fight against that system. And I'm a huge stand and advocate for freedom on all levels: personal freedom, financial freedom, time freedom, location freedom, inner freedom. Every single type of freedom is basically me and what I stand for. So I really am an advocate for that. When it comes to what happened with my family, it was really interesting. So I worked for 7 years in my business before my daughter was born. We found out my wife was pregnant 2 weeks before the world shut down with COVID stuff.
Hmm.
So you can imagine building a business for 7 years, fantasizing about all the things that could happen, trying to plan accordingly to be prepared. I'm like, listen, man, I've checked all the boxes. Okay. Like when I become a dad, I can just turn everything off and I'm free and I can just be a dad. That was the vision. And so we find out this exciting news after years of trying to start a family and with no luck. And finally it's happening. It's really exciting. And I'm like, yes, man, I'm ready, man. I'm free. And like, I was so proud of myself. You know, it was like that moment. I'm like, man, I did it, man. 2 weeks later, the world's shutting down, global pandemic. And I'm like, oh no. And it was this thing where like, I didn't have context. I had no idea what reference point to look at. Like many
Hmm.
people out there, they didn't really know, okay, is this serious? Is it going to like last for the rest of our lives? Is it short term? Like I had no context of like, how do I actually contingency plan this?
Hmm.
And meanwhile, there's 9 months before my daughter is going to born. So I'm like, man, I got to kind of figure this thing out. Like what's going to happen in the next 9 months? So I went through this very weird internal, um, I don't even know what you call it. Like one day I was like doomsday prepping. The next day I'm like, it's not that bad. Like I was all over the place for probably a couple of months when it started, but it was from this fear of becoming a father and bringing my daughter into this upside down clown world. And I'm like, this is not cool, man. So once she was born, I was like, okay, I'm going into like offline. And I was very, excited after years and years and years and years of really a lot of hard work and dedication to my business, of like phones off, computers off, internet, unplug the modem. I'm not available. And my daughter slept on me every single day. We spent all day together as a family. It was a really beautiful, special time. And I didn't know when or if I wanted to actually work. I had an open blank book of like, maybe not sure. We'll see. I was 35 when my daughter was born. So I'm like, there's no way that I'm going to be done for the rest of my life, of course. But I'm like, I don't really know what the future has in store at this point. So I left it open-ended. And I told my wife, I'm like, I might get the itch in 3 months to really go back. It might be 6, it might be 12. I really have no idea. I'm just going to see what happens. So 6 months goes by. I'm like, no desire to do anything work related. A year goes by, zero desire. I'm like, hey, this is really cool. My business was growing 20% year over year. My income was growing. My impact was growing. I worked about 10 hours a week, which I don't consider work. It was like maintenance. I did a couple coaching calls, just to keep myself fresh, but it was very minimal, exactly when I wanted to do it in my schedule. Said no to pretty much everything that came across my desk for the most part. And then my wife had a hair appointment, and she goes every few months, and it's like a big important thing for her.
Of course.
And of course, and there's a conflict of schedule, and her hairdresser had to move her appointment to another day that I would normally do a 2-hour mentorship call that I do once per week. And that's like my passion business. It's not for money. It's just, I really love coaching people in that way. So I do that. And she's like, oh man, I gotta do this appointment on this thing. Should I cancel it? I don't want to interfere with your call. I'm like, no, you know what? I'm like, my daughter's 18 months old. I'm like, I think, this will be a good opportunity for me to introduce her to like this other side of myself, which is the businessman and the mentor and the coach. So we made it happen. And what was really interesting is she comes down, we're doing a Zoom call just like this, same sort of frame, and she's sitting on my lap right here beside me. And this is recorded, by the way. So I'm so grateful that it's documented. She's sitting on my lap, and I could see her on the screen on my computer, and she's looking up at me like this and just gazing. Perfect child, not moving, not moaning, not complaining. She's a toddler, right? It could be going all over the place. She's just sitting there and looking up at me and just staring. And I'm trying to focus. So I'm like kind of ignoring her, sort of like talking. And then all of a sudden I just go, man, I gotta look at her, man. So I pause and I look down in her eyes, and it felt like the universe, like the Big Bang. It was like this explosion of like, man, it was my eyes and her eyes, and like the Big Bang is what it felt like. My heart, boom, my fire, and I just felt it in that moment. I'm like, daddy's back. Like, I need to get back in the game. And because of that moment, I told my wife, I'm like, it's 18 months. That's what it ended up being. It was 18 months of kind of taking this sabbatical or this mini, whatever you want to call it. I don't know, just freedom, I guess. And when I sat with that feeling, it wasn't about personal growth or financial growth personally for my family. It was like, I have to share this with more people out there, man. People got to have that same thing, and I can't stop. If I stop, I'm selfish. If I stop, it's just like, I'm good now, so like, fuck the world kind of thing. But it's like, no, it's the opposite. It's like, I got to get back from an impact standpoint. So to answer your question, I know it was a really long answer, but to answer your question now, I'm more driven than ever to be of service, to give, to improve myself and my skills to better serve the world. That's why I said to you before the call started is I'm really inspired to get into new audiences. Like, I want to speak on other people's stages at other people's events so I can impact them, so I could share this business model and this product and like this way of life that most people don't believe is available to them. They truly don't think this is available for the average, regular, ordinary person that listens to your show and other places. And I'm like, but it is. And I've proven it, and I know it works. So I guess I'm more fired up than ever. From a financial standpoint, the target that I'm really excited about, just as a goal, as a bit of a target, is $1 million a month in personal revenue. That's the next goal that I'm aiming towards, and then we'll see from there. But I'm also really excited to be more philanthropy based. And my target was at 40 years old to really shift into an investor more and more, as opposed to this cash flow business that I've created. So my target is to get to a million a month in my business of monthly reoccurring cash flow. And then obviously I don't need that much to have my life. I could, but that's not really where I want to go. So instead, my plan is to live off of $1 million a year from the cash flow. I want to donate $1 million, and then I want to invest 10 million. So that's my actual numbers that I'm looking to hit. And then we'll see. And who knows after that. So that's my short-term goal.
I love that. I love that clarity. Let me just share you how I'll share with you just how great this show is. So a few years ago, Janet LePage, a young lady, real estate investor. Some people on the show would definitely know of her. She had just hit a $500 million worth of real estate transactions, and she said, "My goal is to hit 1 billion." Well, she hit 1 billion. The next time I had her on the show, she was at 1.2, and I think her goal was 2 billion, and she went to 2.5. And I haven't had her on the show again, only because of timing. But I think Janet and Western Wealth just crested 7 billion in real estate. So it
Amazing.
shows good luck. I'm telling you right now. I'm just saying that.
That's so
But
good.
Balazs, let's go back a little bit, because you made some really interesting observations and comments that I want to see where you're at with it. Not the least of which is, we talk about freedom, then COVID comes along, comes along, we all get locked down. If there's it seems like we're losing freedom on a regular basis. Even this many, well, 3.5+ years later, it doesn't, it's hard to look forward and be optimistic when you look at what's happening economically, when you look at the global macroeconomic things. When you look into the future, how do you see it? Can you still be optimistic? Can you still look at this as a business model for somebody? Do you see it as a safety net? How do you view it when you're talking to potential clients?
Yeah, fantastic question. So, like I mentioned, when the whole news broke around the world and the changes that were happening initially, I felt really like the rug got pulled out from under me. I wasn't really sure how to approach it. I got sucked into the news cycle and the doom and gloom and the fear for sure. Had
Mhm.
to pause and I prefer to be more unaware to a lot of that. Of course, I keep my finger on a lot of the bigger topics and I look into them and I stay open minded to like the pros and cons of it. But one of the things that I discovered about myself during that time was that the truth lays somewhere in the middle, right? Like I was falling further into the doom and gloom and the worst case scenario and the really um like if it went all the way to that far extreme side of things, I'm like I was really believing that that was coming and that was happening. But I realized, like, now in hindsight of how it's played out, obviously the future is still unknown, but just in hindsight, if I analyze my thoughts and how I approach things, it was somewhere in the middle. It was, and when I look at what I can control and what I focus from my thoughts to what I consume to what I read to the actions that I take, that's the place that I thrive. Is as soon as I start thinking about big government and world elites and all these really big agendas, I feel powerless and I feel really small and really insignificant. And then I freeze and then I don't do anything. And then I'm like, what's the point? Like throw in the freaking towel. Like that's the energy that I don't want. So do I know for sure what the future has in store? No, I don't think anybody does. But can I be optimistic and look on the bright side and do my best to provide solutions that I know how to provide? Yes. So that's the place I choose to live. Every once in a while, I'll have a whiskey and watch something crazy for 2 hours and go, shit, man, if that happened, that would be intense. And then I go right back to, hey, let's get focused on what I'm good at, how I can serve people in the solutions. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is with the business model specifically, there's a few key things that I love about Enagic. And there's a couple of, I'll kind of break it down real quick. So, number one, I don't know if you know this, you probably do, but did you know that in Japan, there are over 50,000 companies that are over 100 years old? Did you know that?
Yeah, I did, and it is absolutely amazing when you think about it, isn't it?
So cool. So when I first discovered Enagic, it was a 35-year-old company. It's the same CEO from day one. So the same guy has been running it for the last 49 years. He has a son who's going to take over, who he's been grooming as the next CEO and whatever, when eventually his time comes. He's 82 years old now. He is committed to living to 120. He still travels and acts and plays golf, and he's very fit and healthy and all the things. And, so he's convinced he'll live to 120, and his son is the successor of the business, and they have like a multi-generation plan like so many Japanese companies. So that gives me a lot of peace of mind of what I'm building is for the future. It is for the long term.
Mhm.
Now, when the COVID stuff happened, I definitely had an oh shit moment because it is a handmade high-end technology, medical technology in Japan. they hand assemble them like a Rolls Royce, and then they ship them from Japan all over the world. So in my mind, I'm thinking logistically, oh no, what happens to the manufacturing? What happens to the parts? What happens to shipping? What happens to the borders and the shutdowns and the restrictions and the lockdowns? I went into like, oh no, what if we can't sell this product? What if there's delays? What if it's sold out? What if it's unavailable? So I definitely had that moment of like,
Hmm.
shit, maybe this is not a good business to be in when all this is going on. So that first 30 days of when news hit, like mid-March, I think it was, to end of April, so 6 weeks, I was in a fear of, oh man, is my check in a tank and whatever. And it didn't. And the commissions never stopped. The business never stopped. And what I found out from my community, including myself, was that this became a more in-demand opportunity and business
Hmm.
model. And the
Hmm.
reason for it was the freedom aspect of it. For example, when people started being told that they had to get the vaccine or different things, it went against people's freedom of choice.
Hmm.
And so a lot of people who were in a safe, comfy job, corporate, whatever it was, were starting to be told, you have to do this to stay working here or you're done. Like, we're going to let you go. So a lot of the people that thought they would stay in that type of career long term started going, I don't want this to ever happen to me again. And interestingly enough, many people that were in that predicament had a choice. Kind of. It was framed as a non choice. But, anyways, the people who said, you know what, I'm going to quit this job because I don't agree with what you're making me do, were now unemployed, technically screwed financially with their bills and things like this. And many of them invested into this business and they figured it out. And now they created incredible freedom, incredible finances, all the things. But it was because of this catalyst of what happened. So other people just went along with it and whatever. That's their decision, right? So when we look at Enagic as a company, what I love about them is the long-term generational business plan, the whole succession model of like grooming your family members into that role, and the fact of how they handled things with logistics and business and operations during such a nightmare of a situation where so many businesses went under and they didn't pivot and they didn't adjust to how they do things. Enagic killed it, like knocked it out of the park. So they had their first $1 billion in sales year last year after
Wow.
48 years of being in business. And that's in US dollars as well, currency. And then so that was big. Now another thing that they're brilliant about is that they have a holding company, parent company in Japan, and then they have other smaller subsidiary companies all around the world in all these different regions and countries, etc. So, as an independent affiliate myself, I can actually shift my distributor account to another jurisdiction and another company, and overnight, I reroute my money.
Hmm.
That's unique. That's super cool. So when the Canada stuff got really bad in BC, 8 months of like really bad lockdowns and whatever, we
Hmm.
went to Mexico, unvaccinated, got out of here. We didn't want to go down that route personally. We went down to Mexico and we bought a villa in Mexico. And we're building that now as a bit of a safe haven of like, man, if shit goes weird here, at least we can go bounce to Mexico. And we also chose Mexico because of the driving. Like technically, if we really needed
Totally.
to, we could drive there. So that was
Yeah.
part of our like contingency plan when I was in the doom and gloom sort of mindset, which is
Yeah.
great because we got a really cool vacation property that's currently being built. But the other side of it is, let's say like all of North America gets really weird. It's like we could go to Europe, we could go other parts of the world, we reroute everything, get paid in different currencies. If the US currency fails, we can get paid in euros, we can get paid in other things. So there's a lot of options and flexibility in the business to have
Hmm.
that location independence. So unless we lose all financial currencies and the ability to access the internet across the whole world, we should be all right. And Enagic is like really committed to that as well. So what I see for the future that has happened and accelerated this shift to people having online businesses, side hustles, side incomes, etc., is that there was this huge red flag and this warning that went off, and some people have heard it and said, okay, I need to learn something different, I need to pivot, I need to make an adjustment. And some people have ignored it and pretend like everything went back to how it was
Hmm.
pre-COVID, which we know isn't the case.
No.
um, and then the final thought that I have is around The business model itself that we promote is around getting paid to be you. So when we look at social media and what people share, right? Everybody has their own interests. And some people have children and a family, and that's really important to them. Other people are digital nomads who travel, who don't want children. Other people are passionate about art or music or yoga or whatever it is. Everyone's got their thing. But majority of those things are not monetizable easily without getting stuck into a brick and mortar traditional business. For example, if you want to be a yoga instructor, well, what does that come with? Well, that comes with you needing clients. You have to stay put so the clients can come to you. So now you have to pick a location for your yoga. Maybe you have a yoga studio. So the passion is yoga. And then you start bolting on all this stuff that feels heavy. And you're like, man, I don't really want to do any of this shit. I just love yoga. Can't I be paid to just do yoga on my own and not have to do it to make money? So what we really teach people to do is build a personal brand, identify the things like their ikigai. If you are familiar with ikigai and all the circles, is like, what's your ikigai? What falls into that perfect center place? And then how do you have a vehicle and a business model that just supports you to be paid to be you? So if you want to post yoga poses or yoga instructions on your social media, your TikTok, your whatever, because that's what you love, and then people are like, how do you get to travel the world and do yoga on every single beach on the planet? How are you doing that? Click the link in my bio and let me show you this business model. So
Right.
everything has been framed that way. And then after they learn the business model, the next piece is they go, oh, it's water. I need water. This makes sense. And it's not a weird thing like a transition. So that's how we've done things very effectively. And I do believe that the future is unlocking more and more international, no borders type of businesses. And like, I talk to every single time zone almost every 24 hours, and it's not even weird for me anymore. I just
Mhm.
know this window in PST is the perfect window in Australia or London or whatever, and I just accommodate that. And I really love that. I always wanted to have a global like make the world my playground, right? Like I traveled to Australia 5 times in the last little while. It's a long flight. It's a big, big thing. And I don't even get jet lag anymore because I figured out sort of these things of making it feel like I drove, kind of close by because of the repetition and stuff. And I love that. I think it's so cool to be anywhere on the planet within 24 hours of a flight, like
Yeah.
now I just need my own PJ, and then we're taking things to a whole nother level. But right now, business and first is really, really nice. But ultimately, I think like when I see some guys like Grant Cardone and whatever, and they got choppers and they got planes, I'm like, that would be really cool just from a time saving aspect. And um, having a business meeting in Dubai, like, yeah, I'll see you in 3 hours or whatever, however long it
Yeah.
takes to get there. I'm like, man, that's badass. So that's kind of one of my personal goals is just ease of use and really connecting the world more personally. But yeah, I think it's just the beginning for this type of business model, to be honest. And companies growing rapidly. My business is 30% year over year right now in the last 2 years. So 2.25% month over month. And that's pretty outstanding. I'll tell you one quick thing and then I'll stop, is that when I hit the first rank in the company, it's 100 product sales to hit the rank. It took me 11 months. And because I track my monthly sales, I can forecast where we're headed, right? And so I told people beginning of the fourth quarter of 2022 that based on the forecast, we will average one new person at least per day in my organization at that level that took me 11 months when I started. And that's happened. We're at 191 people or something like this for this year. And it's more days than it's outstanding. So that compounding is really possible with this model as well. And you never know who knows who, where, and how. And there's no borders. You can't say like, oh, I can't do business in Africa. Sorry. There's literally no place on the planet we can't build this, which I think is really cool.
I love that. I absolutely love it, and of course, I love the product. I've used it for 10 years plus. Stephanie and I have done that, and I
That's
attribute a
so
lot of
awesome.
just how healthy our life has been to that being part of our lifestyle and our own kind of healthy living. So, love it. So. As we wind down, because we've been going at this for a while, it's such a
Yeah.
great story, such a great story, and I love it, Blas. So I have a little bit of fun. Some what we call rapid fire questions that are rarely rapid, but let's try it anyways. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask the question, although I think I know the answer anyways. But Android or iPhone?
iPhone, 100%.
100%. Oh, yeah. Of course. There would be no other answer. Do you have a favorite band, a favorite tune?
uh, I listen to a lot of different types of music.
Hmm.
The two that I would say are the most frequent
Hmm.
are there's a playlist on Apple, of course, we just talked about that. It's called Piano Chill. It's a
Hmm.
playlist.
Hmm.
It absolutely hits the spot for me. That piano is so soothing, so relaxing. So we pretty much play that every night around sunset. We got a beautiful sunset on our back patio. So it's piano and sunset is a vibe for me. And then I'm
Hmm.
a huge fan of Drake's music, overall, his catalog of music. I'm a
Hmm.
huge fan of because it really inspires me to speak it into existence. I think Drake has done an outstanding job over his career to say, I'm going to be the best. And then he backed it up and made it happen. And I really aspire to do a similar thing. And in my job or like my career and what I do, so much of what I have created actually started with me speaking it into existence on Facebook posts and stuff. Like, watch me, it's what we're going to create, it's what we're going to do, way back when I had no business really saying those types of things. So Drake is a really inspiring. Every time I listen to his music, man, I feel like let's go, let's improve, let's get better. So those would be my top two picks for. But there's so many I could share.
Oh yeah, for sure, of course. Well, and Drake's an interesting cat, for sure. And I don't know that I'd be a fan, but I listen to Drake. And something that your piano, I write. I have a playlist of piano, and when I'm writing, which I do quite a lot, I love to put that particular playlist on.
It's
So that's
so
kind of
good.
cool.
Yeah, you
Um,
should share the piano with me. I love it. That piano chill. It's nice because they're always updating it. So whenever I
yeah,
like a song, I'll save it to my library. But it's always kind of new stuff, and it's right that sweet. It's not quite classical, and it's not quite like modern. It's just that perfect sort of melody for me of the many ways that you can play the piano.
favorite movie? Do you have one?
Favorite movie.
Whatever your daughter is watching, right? That's your answer.
Right now, she's into the shows. She hasn't quite hit the age of movies yet.
Yeah.
For me, I love the inspirational movies. The come up stories, anything along those lines is really what gets me inspired and motivated. I like to watch those kinds of movies. There's one that just came to mind. It wouldn't be my favorite, but it just came to mind is Straight Outta Compton. I don't know if you've seen that one
Yeah.
with and that scene where they're in the studio and they're trying to figure out the final little beat and they're like, no, there's a play, get it back. And then finally you hear like it lands, and then that's the song that we all know, right? Movies
Yeah.
like that where you kind of get the behind the scenes of all the struggles and challenges, what they came like. I love that stuff. So anything in that category would be my favorite.
Do you have a favorite inspirational quote? I know we all have lots of them, but is there one that you kind of go to that you drop often?
Yeah, my most commonly one that I think about is from Zig Ziglar when he says, if you help enough other people create what they want, eventually you'll have everything that you want. So that's kind of been my driver for so long of how it's all connected when you come from a place of service, and that it always comes back onto you. And then the other one is I'd rather have 1% of 100 people's efforts than 100% of my own efforts, from J. Paul Getty. And those
Good
two
one.
those are really good. Yeah.
Very good. And what about book? What was a favorite book or a book that had the most impact on you?
Uh, so many. I think if I was to pick a couple at least, so The Magic by Rhonda Byrne, who's the author of The Secret.
Hmm.
It's a gratitude book, 28-day gratitude book. Every day is a little bit different. It really grounds me and makes me not take things for granted, even the simple things in life. So I use that as a part of my daily routine.
Hmm.
And Happy Pocket Full of Money really made me shift my beliefs around what money
Another,
is.
it's such a great book. Isn't that a great book?
Yeah.
And I wanted to
Yeah.
say, earlier on when you were saying something about you're sharing the story, and I don't remember exactly the story, but it reminded me of the book The Gap and the Gain, because
Mm,
you were spending a lot of time looking at the gap instead of the gain. But somewhere in that
mhm.
story I went, oh, here's somebody who naturally just said, okay, I got to start looking at all of the gain, quit looking at the gap.
I
as
love that book
as
also. Mhm.
that's such a great book, such a great book. And he released another book, by the way, Your Future Self, which is a book that
Don't have
Stephanie and
that
I,
one yet.
yeah, the great book. Ben Hardy did a great job on that book as well. Do you have a favorite swear word, a go-to?
Probably just classic fuck, I think.
Yeah, probably. We laugh. I'm telling you, I have guests all the time that go, no, I don't really swear. I go, what the hell?
I definitely swear quite a bit. I actually forgot to ask you how much swearing is allowed on the show, if it's swearing or no swearing, because I had to bite my tongue a couple times on this episode trying not to. But but it's interesting though, because I feel like it can make a real big impact with the delivery of your passion and your message and whatnot. And I remember the first time I went to Tony Robbins in person live, and none of his public stuff really shows him ever swearing, right? Like his public
Mm,
stuff is very clean. And I was so shocked. Every fifth word was like the F bomb and this and that. I'm like, who is this guy? I'm like, is this what I paid for to just hear him? And like, and then as soon as that happened, I'm like, man, he's a homie, right? Like
yeah.
he's just one of the dudes. So yeah, that was
Do
interesting.
you follow Patrick Bet David at all?
I do. Yeah, he's amazing as well. I learn a lot from his stuff.
Yeah, Patrick Bet David's great. Anyways, I've been on coaching calls with him, and yeah, he loosens right up when you're
Yeah,
in
because he
person.
doesn't
It's
really
pretty funny.
publicly. I don't see him
No,
swearing either, right?
he's pretty clean. He's pretty clean.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty funny. And finally, Balazs, what are you grateful for today?
Oh man, everything. I'm so grateful for my life, my family, my health, my daughter, my wife. I'm one of those guys that constantly stays in a state of gratitude. It's probably the emotion that I want to stay in as much as possible. So I'm just so grateful for you. I'm grateful for being on the show. I'm grateful for everybody listening, and I'm just grateful to be alive and still have a lot of impact and experiences and memories to create in this life. And yeah, man, just grateful for all of it.
Cool. And I am certainly grateful to have met you so many years ago and have been able to circle back and have you join me on the show. And look forward to having conversations again in the near future. Balash, thanks so much for sharing your insights, your wisdom. And I love this business model and the product because I'm familiar with it. I'm kind of scratching my head going, what the hell? How come I didn't pick up on this way sooner? Anyways, we joke. So
Yeah, it's been great
thanks very
chatting
much.
about it. Thanks for having me as well, and I'm sure we'll do this again another time.
You bet we will.